Somebody that I've known since probably the late 80s when I was covering MSU Theater and Greta was an actress up there. You have probably seen her. If you've not seen her on stage, you've seen her in commercials. Maybe you've gone to a corporate presentation that she participated in or presented. So I'm going to step aside and introduce our guest speaker. Please give her a big Kiwanis welcome to Greta Grosch.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I wanted to share my screen. So I think, is that John who needs to make it possible for me to? Yes, I was. Hello, everybody. Indeed. And Doc already mentioned that I am a proud Ellis Street alumni. So I am a Mankato grad. I was there when it was Mankato State University. And I was a BS in theater, actor, director. I know, magna cum laude, Ellis Street singer, proud alumni of Highland Summer Theater, and somewhere along the line, I became a church basement lady. So that's the question. How did I say I'm trying all this new technology. How did I turn into this? So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today, sort of the process of how I went from this proud Mankato State alum to this church basement lady, and how this really has sort of become my life and my career and my livelihood. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the shows, Church Basement Ladies is a musical comedy. It first opened back in September 2005. And it all takes place in a rural Minnesota Lutheran church basement. Perhaps some of you recognize those lime green walls and the serving window. Indeed, this is where you would get your lutefisk, whether you spelled it with a D or a T, your lutefisk, and your jello and your bars. And the cast of, and this is like the 1950s and 60s in rural Minnesota, and the cast is made up of these 5 characters. So I'm the tall one in the back, Mavis Gilmerson, who is a farm wife. And then you have Vivian Snewstad, the one with the coffee pot. She's the matriarch of the kitchen, very traditional. Then you have Karen Engelson, who's the best dressed and the best cook, sort of the Betty Crocker of the kitchen. Her husband is the John Deere dealer. Her young daughter, Signe Engelson, and then, of course, our pastor. And you'll notice over the course, this was back in 2005. So as I show you photos, just take note of the pastor's hairline, because over the last 15 years, it has moved back. Some of the rest of us have sort of stayed the same, but his hairline, just the passage of time as it goes through. So this first show ran for 2.5 years, and it ran for so long that the young girl over there holding the jello, her name is Ruthie, she was in her early 20s. She wanted to move to New York and find her career. So she was replaced by this young actress named Tara. And Tara was 19 at the time. We were doing these shows at the Plymouth Playhouse in Plymouth, Minnesota, and there was a Green Mill restaurant above. And we said to Tara, again, she was 19, we said, when you turn 21, we're going to take you upstairs and we're going to buy you a drink. And she said, if I'm still doing this show when I turn 21, I'm going to shoot myself. Well, not only did she turn 21 while we were doing that particular show, but the character also went from being a brunette to a blonde. And so Tara, we just saw her go through all these passages of time. She hates it when I tell that story, but it's true. We all sort of got stuck in the basement, for better or for worse. So the shows were based on this book, Growing Up Lutheran. So these 2 women, Janet Letnes Martin and Suzanne Nelson, they met at Augsburg College. They're now in their 70s, so that gives you an idea of how long ago that was. And they found out that they had a lot in common. So they wrote a series of books, and this was their most popular one. It won a Minnesota Book Award. And they took sort of their lives and their comedy and their writing, and they turned it into this act. Now, this is when this is going to get exciting, because I think I have an audio of it, so I'm hoping you can hear it. So, Mike, I can see you. Can you hear this? Yeah. Come out, 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 dear ladies. Sing with me. Come out, come out, come out, dear ladies. Come out, come out, come out, come out, come out, dear ladies. Come out. So here's a little of their comedy. 100% Norwegian Lutheran farm girls who didn't turn and didn't dance, and to memorized all of Luther's small catechism. And it wasn't so small then. This is most certainly true. So that was Janet and Suzanne, and they were traveling around performing at churches and things. And Kurt Wolin, our boss, he got the rights to their work and turned their comedy into these characters. This is Vivian Snewstead again, and turned them into these musicals. And it was really amazing because I'd been doing theater for a long time, and this was the first time, that opening night when the curtain went up and people started laughing because they saw themselves on stage. Like nobody had ever done a musical, a play about just church basement ladies, and people started laughing right away as soon as the curtain went up. And I thought, oh, this is what it feels like to be in a hit. So I did, again, with the wonders of technology, here's a little bit of the opening number. I'm going ahead a little bit. Okay.
No, actually, Greta, I don't think we can hear that. Can anybody else hear that?
Oh, yep. Sorry. I have to stop this. John is saying something to me. What did you say, John?
Actually, Greta, we can't hear that.
Okay, great. Never mind then.
That's the
So anyway,
technology too.
I know. So I told Mike, I said, you guys, I'm not getting paid to talk to you, so I could experiment. So I told Mike, I said, I'm trying some new tech, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So anyway, but the moral of the story is Kurt went up, audience loved the show. And that was 15 years ago. So now here it is, 2020, and I have put on my cat eye glasses and my practical shoes over 2,000 times, probably close to 3,000 times if you count promos and visits to the state fair. And I remember telling my boss, I do not want to be a church basement lady for the rest of my life. And he was like, Greta, ride the gravy train. And so I had started off my career as a professional actress. So I was doing all of these shows. I was, Dolly and Hello Dolly. And this is me at Highland Summer Theater playing Maria Callas in Masterclass. And this is me playing the stepmother in Cinderella at the Ordway. Here I am as Miss Hannigan. So I had this really glamorous life as a theater person. And throughout the course of my career, I got a guitar and I learned myself some guitar chords, and that was the first writing I'd ever done. So I was writing these funny songs to learn guitar, and then I went and I auditioned at the Brave New Workshop. Dudley Riggs, I think, is a Mankato alumni, and we had to submit some of our writing to go, because this is a writer's workshop, like a Saturday Night Live. And the only writing that I had was my little funny songs that I'd written on my guitar. And Dudley, this man right here, was like, go ahead, bring in your funny songs. And so that was the first time that I really became a writer. And I learned what it was like to be in the writer's room and to write a script and to learn how to cut your stuff and to take feedback and things. So this is all leading me to where I ended up. So that was my sort of experience as a writer. Then I wrote a one-woman show so I could play all these different characters. So I was starting to exercise my skills as a writer. Then I joined the cast of Tony and Tina's Wedding. Sandy Hay City Theater, also a Mankato alumni. I joined the cast of Tony and Tina's Wedding, and Sandy started hiring me, as Mike alluded to earlier, to start doing some corporate theater. We would get lots of corporate companies would come for their Christmas parties. They would come to the show, and because I knew my funny songs, I had my little guitar and my funny songs, and I'd worked with Dudley, I started writing like little sketches and songs for them. So I was sort of a burgeoning writer. I was working on my career as a writer while I was still pursuing my career as an actor. So that sort of took off, and I started doing more corporate training and motivational speaking and things like that. So this is where I was in my career from the time, for the first 20 years, basically, of my career. When I left Mankato, I was sort of building up a career as an actor, as a writer, as a corporate trainer, doing some sort of some of my own work as well. So then I got cast in Church Basement Ladies as an actor, straight up as an actor. And I had people convinced that they were writing the show for me. And the music guy, the lyricist, I I said to him, I said, I'd love to be in Church Basement Ladies. And he goes, well, we'd love to have you audition for the show. But I was so sure that this was my show. So I was thrilled when I finally got cast. And putting the show together really was a puzzle. As I mentioned earlier, Janet and Suzanne had written all these books, and they had their stand-up comedy, and they had their lives, and they would go and have these big meetings, and you're trying to write a fictional piece of material based on real life, and it was really fun for us in the room. And because I'd come from Dudley Riggs, I was really a collaborative worker. So we would sit around at rehearsal, and Kurt's like, "Where's Hot Dish? Where's the scene where we talk about Hot Dish?" And we would all start brainstorming. So at this point in 2005, we're having these conversations, and I was able to sort of keep track of everything that was happening. And everybody said, Greta, you should be the writer if there's a sequel. And I was like, well, I don't know about that, but we'll see. So about this time, Kurt, my boss, was listening to all of this, and he also is the producer for the Medora musical. So that year, 2006, then, he hired me to write the Medora musical. And I'm still doing that too, by the way. And I think he was sort of testing me to see if we could work well together, to see how I did as a writer. Again, up to now, I'd only written some corporate stuff. I'd done some sketch comedy. I'd written my funny songs, but to really write something that was bigger. So 2006 was the first year that I wrote the Medora musical, and it went well. And Kurt said to me, I was the first writer he'd ever worked with who didn't cry. So that was a lot of pressure. So even now, whenever I want to cry, I just go to my car and do it quietly by myself. So that worked out great. And so what happened is Kurt then did indeed hire me to write the sequel, a second helping Church Basement Ladies sequel, opened in March of 2008. That show ran for a year and a half. And I just intentionally, I did it sort of as a straight sequel. So we had our same characters. We moved forward in our storyline. So where the previous show had ended in 1968, we moved forward to 1969. So we just advanced the story of the characters. There you've got some Hot Dish and you've got some Jell-O. Pastor's hairline is starting to recede a little bit. And it was really fun, and it was a great experience for me. And again, this was the first time I'd done anything like this. So it did create some problems. And one of the problems that it created is that I had been an actor in the show, and now I am the writer. And it was sort of this hierarchy change. So it created some tension in the cast. We have worked through it, but it wasn't necessarily smooth sailing. And the stress of it is, as a result of it, I lost my voice because that's where I'm vulnerable. And I went to the music director and I said, I'll be okay. This is just really stressful for me. But it went okay. We figured it out. And then in November of 2009, we opened a Christmas show, Away in the Basement, a Church Basement Ladies Christmas. And this time we went back in time. So we had been at 1970, so we moved back to 1959. And so our young actress now, who is now in her 20s, was playing Mary in the Christmas program, 15, 16 years old. So this was the Christmas show. And you'll notice that this is a different Vivian Snewstad, because Janet Paoni, who had been our original cast member, was in Kansas City doing Church Basement Ladies 2 with Greg Brady. Can you hear that?
We can't hear it, but we can see it.
Okay, yeah. Great. So we've had some celebrities who have done the shows. That was Greg Brady with Janet Paoni, and this was William Christopher, Father Mulcahy and MASH. And I actually did Church Basement with Ladies with him a couple times. And right now, before the coronavirus, Cindy Williams from Laverne and Shirley, she was supposed to be doing Church Basement Ladies in April and May right now. So again, it's been fun to have these little celebrities who have done the show. And the shows have been so popular that theaters across the country do these shows. And they say it sort of saved their theaters because people are coming back. And the big joke is, like at dinner theaters around the country, that they need to add the word church to every show. So it should be like Barefoot in the Church instead of Barefoot in the Park, or Arsenic and the Old Church Lace, and Fiddler on the Church Roof. two church gentlemen from Verona, the church music man, the sound of church music. And so producers around the country are like, if you just put church in the title, people will come. And the shows, again, hugely popular. Over 3 million people have seen the shows. I mean, it's generated like, I don't know how many millions of dollars for theaters. We've been licensed in 48 states and Canada. But critics don't always get it. Like, they don't always understand the charm of these musical comedies. And one critic, the shows were on tour in Dallas, and the theater critic wrote in the paper, "Church Basement Ladies will be adored by its target audience." You got a problem with that? And it's true that even though critics, and even our shows, every time we do a new show, we have the same critics come and review it, and they're like, "I don't get it. Audience seems to love it. They're doing it again. It's the same stuff." And it's true, like, we try to do some of the same jokes, like Vivian Snewstead always enters with bread bag boots on her feet, because that's part of the charm of creating these shows and these sequels, is that people get to see them again. And audiences love them. I mean, we hear things like, "I haven't laughed this hard in years," or we're hearing a lot from farmers. We just did one of our last shows. This farmer came, he was in his 80s. He'd never been to a play before, and he was so emotional because we were showing his life on stage. And he was like, "I loved it. I'd never seen a show before." We used to do something called a joyed it line, short for enjoyed it, after the show, where you'd shake hands with the audience and they'd be like, "Joyed it, joyed it, joyed it." And one lady, she leaned into me and she whispered, she said, "My friend warned me it was going to be funny, so I wore an extra thick pad today." We're like, okay. Personally, I've only had 2 accidents on stage because I was laughing so hard. But it's true that people love these shows. And we have this other friend of ours. She was a mom, just a mom, not necessarily our target audience. But after she'd seen one of the shows, she was like, "Oh, I get it. You fall in love with these characters and you don't want them to go away." And it's true, people were falling in love with them. So we went on and did another one. 2011, A Mighty Fortress is Our Basement. And we had our same cast. But I, as a writer, was really growing and learning, because I was learning that what we were capable of doing and what the audience was willing to do. How they were willing to go on these trips. This is what's called a single unit set, because the whole show takes place in one kitchen. So that we didn't have any big set changes. But if we sort of put on a different hat and told the audience we were going somewhere different, they would go with us. So, for example, in this show, in this version, the pastor gets married to his new young wife. And the basement floods. And so we have to hold the reception in the Catholic kitchen. And so we're like, how can we, and all of these shows were always talking about how different the Catholics are. And so what we did is we had our very same set. We changed a cross on a wall to a crucifix. We had a picture, that grace picture, which is the guy praying over a loaf of bread in our Lutheran kitchen. We put up a picture of the Pope. We put a calendar, Knights of Columbus calendar on the refrigerator, and we put some beer in the fridge. And then what happened is, so the exact same set, we made a few little tiny changes, and the ladies entered it, and we entered the Catholic kitchen. This is the moment when we all enter it, and we say, "Oh, it looks just like ours." So we're realizing that the audience is willing to do whatever we want them to do. If we want to pretend it's a Catholic kitchen, they'll go with us. We started really having fun. This is a scene, Karen, the one over there in the blue skirt. This was a time in life, so this is the late 50s, early 60s, when you could have a driver's license and never drive. So the ladies, we decide that we're going to teach Karen to drive. So we made a truck, a pickup truck, out of like a little cart, which, as you can see, we put just pot tops on it. She used a Jello mold and a plunger, and we had a song, a whole driving song, and the audience completely bought it, because they are willing, when an audience comes to the theater, they'll believe whatever you tell them. And if you say this is a truck and we're learning to drive, they will completely go with you. And that was really fun for us to continue to learn as we moved forward, which of course we did. So we moved on to the last potluck supper. This was number 5 in the series. And we thought for sure we're going to be done. This is it. We're done. 5. That's enough. This is ridiculous. We even called it the last potluck supper. And in this show, like so many we now jumped ahead to 1979. And like this is, sorry if it's a little blurry, but what happens in so many of these small churches, and maybe it's happened to yours, the attendance was really down. And so the church was going to have to close their doors. So it was really sad and really heartbreaking that we were closing our church. So we were like, this is the end of the series. This is the end of our church. We're closing the church. And we're trying to figure out how it was going to end. So Vivian Snewstad, who's been, again, the matriarch of our kitchen, we decided that she's the one who had owned the land that the church was on, and she was going to move the church and turn it into a museum. So that was a really great ending to the show. But thinking that we were going to end the series, I had written the show. We weren't sure if should Vivian die at the end? And everybody's like, no, you can't let her die. You can't let her die. So I was trying to figure out she'd been a widow by this time in our shows for 30 years. So what could the ending be? So we would have workshops every 6 weeks or so. I like to take about 9 months to write one of these shows. And every 6 weeks we'd have a workshop. Every workshop I would have made some more progress. We'd have more songs. We'd play the songs. And on this particular day, I had a secret, and I didn't tell anybody how the show was going to end. We thought this was the end of the series. We thought this was the end of the show. I didn't tell anybody. So I pass out the scripts to everybody, and I'm like, don't look at the last page. And we're sitting there and we're doing the reading, and we turn the page, and we've moved to the church. It's a lovely spring day in 1979. And Vivian, I'm getting goosebumps just remembering that moment. And Vivian comes out in a wedding dress because she's getting remarried at this church. And everybody in the room was just like, oh, and I was just so proud of myself that I'd come up with this really wonderful way to sort of tie a bow on our little series. But as I mentioned, people love these shows. They come by the busload. And when we told them that we were done, there was an uproar. And I said to Kurt, my boss, I said, if we're going to move forward with another one, we have to change something. We have to change the set. We have to add different characters. Something has to happen. And so we decided to add some more men. So we did indeed write number 6, Rise Up, O Men. And we told the story. So we added 2 extra cast members. So we were now 3 women, 3 men. And we told the story from the perspective of the men. So we could talk about husbands and wives and scrap lumber, manly stuff. And because we were using this sort of different viewpoint, I called Graydon Royce, who was one of the critics, Minneapolis theater critic, who didn't necessarily understand the shows and why they were so successful, but happened to be a Lutheran man in his 60s who was getting ready to retire. And he was on the church council and sang in the choir. And I asked him if he would come and write this show with me. And everybody was like, Graydon doesn't like these shows. And I went, well, he does as a person. As a critic, maybe not. But as a Lutheran, as a Minnesotan, he sees the value in these shows. So he came on board. And as I mentioned, because of how I came up, these workshops would be very collaborative. So sometimes sitting around the table, we would have 16 people giving their opinions about what they thought should happen in the show. Should Vivian die or not die? Did Karin know how to drive or not know how to drive? We would have all these voices in the room. And when Graydon joined the pack, he said, that's a lot of noise, Greta. And I was like, I know. That's why I have to go cry in the car after every one of these workshops. And he said, you have to shut the noise out and write the show that you want to write. It's great that all of these people have opinions, but at the end of the day, you have to trust yourself. And that's been one of the biggest lessons for me, is that I always felt like I was writing these shows for somebody else. I was writing these shows for Janet and Suzanne. I was writing these shows for Kurt, for our audience. But I also had to write these shows a little bit for me and realize that I had something to say. So after the success of CBL 6, we move forward with number 7, You Smell Barn. And this was a case where I feel like every show I'm getting better as a writer. Again, I'm figuring out what I'm capable of, what the audience is capable of, and I'm trusting myself more. And so this is one where I had a really strong concept for this one. And I wasn't sure that people were going to be on board, but I was able to sell them on this idea. And every time we go, like I said, I think I'm getting better, but audiences still have their favorites. And sometimes it's the first one, and I did not write the first one. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one is their favorite. The first one, you never forget your first, as long as we don't disappoint them with the next one. So You Smell Barn went really great. Like I said, it's one of my favorites of work that I've done. And then we did another one, number 8, Hark the Basement Ladies Sing. That just ran last Christmas. And ladies and gentlemen, we were to open number 9 in September of 2020. I should have been in my final rewrites right now, getting ready to start rehearsals in August. But again, pandemic. As of March 13th, every single job that I have as an actor, as a writer, as a producer, every single job has gone away. And that's sort of the sad nature of this pandemic, is because it's really affected all of us. And one of the jobs that went away is I was supposed to come back to Highland Summer Theater and do a remount of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. That was the very first show in the Andreas Theater so many years ago. And I was going to come back and reprise that role sort of as a last hurrah with Dr. Paul Hustles, whose first day at Mankato was my first day at Mankato. And that was another one of the things that got canceled back in March when all of this happened. And we're at 12:59, and I know that some of you have to sign off, so go ahead if you do. But just as I know we want to do some Q&A, I think. But the thing about these shows is what's made these shows so successful. Again, as I mentioned, Kurt calls these the unsung heroes of the basement. These are the Marys and Marthas who sort of make everything run, the schools and the churches and the hospitals. You know, now when everybody's celebrating the essential workers, these were the essential workers of the church basement. And that really resonated with audiences. And it made me realize that I have something to say, even if it is as a middle-aged woman. And I'm still too young to play this role, by the way, but I can play it for the rest of my life. So I'm going to stop my share. It's 12:59. So if anybody has any questions or anything, anybody have any, because I know that you sometimes do Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for me? And somebody just said, and the thing about when I play Mavis, this is the sad part, it takes me 6 minutes to get ready. So even now, as I sit here talking to you, I am 6 minutes from being a church basement lady. I have my wig. I should have done it. I have my wig and my shoes just right down the hall in my closet. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one for you, Greta. You know, at the possibility of sounding stupid, well, that train's already left the station. But what is the Medora musical? I don't know what that is.
Great. Thank you. So Medora, North Dakota, Teddy Roosevelt, back in the late 1800s, after he was recovering from the death of his wife and his mother on the same day, he went out to Medora, North Dakota for a hunting trip, and he fell in love, and he became a rancher. So this is where Teddy Roosevelt, he found the bully spirit. So it was just a Western cow town, and so he owned a couple ranches there. He was only out there for about 4 years, but he says he never would have become president had it not been for his time spent in North Dakota. That's really when he became a cowboy and all of that stuff. So that it sort of became a ghost town. And then in the 60s, Harold Schaefer of the Gold Seal Company, Mr. Bubble Glasswax, he bought some of the old buildings and started to restore Medora. So since the 1960s, it is now owned by the Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation. The Theodore Roosevelt National Park is right there in Medora. One of the entrances is in Medora. And the whole town has been restored. So it's sort of this old West town. And they have a 2,800 seat amphitheater. It's been out there doing shows for 50 plus years, and it's dedicated to preserving the legacy of Theodore Roosevelt and the Old West.
Okay.
So
Great.
there you go.
Thank you.
It sounds like I said, yeah.
I have a question for you, Greta. You clearly are excited about everything you do, which is absolutely fabulous. But I'm wondering, what gets you the most excited about what you do?
Well, thank you for asking that. And this has been a really good time to ask that question because, as I've said to other artists that aren't working, it can be really frustrating. And I've said to them, this is a time to find out what it is that we love about what we do, because there is no money to be made right now. So that's been a great question, because for 30 some years, I've just been working and I haven't necessarily found a lot of joy. It's been fun, but I haven't gotten back to what's been fun because I'm so busy just doing the work. So this pandemic, although we've all lost a lot of work, has given me the opportunity to figure out what it is that brings me joy. And what brings me joy is, I think, having an idea and seeing the idea through, being creative, like whatever that is. So it isn't necessarily the performing piece, making people laugh and stuff. That's fun. But what really brings me joy is having an idea, figuring out how to share that idea, and then sharing that idea. The sort of the problem solving piece of it. When I came to Mankato at the beginning, I was a math major. I've always loved math. I loved the logicness of math and the finiteness of math as you work out a problem to a solution. And that's what brings me joy, is when I figure out the problem to a solution. So even as a writer, or when doing Church Basement Ladies, when we're trying to work out a bit, we did a bit in You Smell Barn where we had a character who had a glass eye. So he had a marble and he had to spit out, he sneezed and his glass eye falls out. And then I go pick it up, and figuring out how to orchestrate that so that it was successful every single time. That was one of my favorite rehearsals, trying to figure out the comedy of chasing a glass ball around a stage. That's what brings me joy.
Okay. Other questions for Greta?
Greta, I remember your days back in the glory days of theater here in Mankato. Tom Gibbous, the Norville Sisters, Ruben Schonbaum, those were great years. How did you get involved with Minnesota, the public television? I've seen you host some of those shows on there. Getting involved with that, and is all that spontaneous? Is a lot of that scripted? Do you have to come up with some of that narratives when they're doing the pledge breaks and stuff like that, or how'd you get involved?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Twin Cities Public Television, our public television station, they do pledge breaks. And once upon a time, years ago, like 15 years ago or something, they had in the audition section that they were looking for people to come and host. So I went and auditioned and to do these on-air pledge breaks. So that's how I just went and auditioned. And how it works is that they do a little lineup. So like it's going to be a 10-minute break, and then you're in what's called an A position, a B position, a C position. One of the reasons I was eager to do this is so I could learn all this. We wear an earpiece, so the producer in the booth is talking to us. I know that I have 1 minute and 30 seconds. So they might say, walk through the gifts, high to low. I have 1 minute and 30 seconds, but they don't tell me what to say. There's a floor director who is holding up signs that say 30 seconds, 20 seconds. Then they count you down, and then they tell you to toss. It's called toss. So we are not scripted. I'm just talking. Clearly, I don't have a problem with that. And one time, the floor director came up to me because he counted down. It was time for me to toss to the next person. And I kept talking. And he came up to me during a break and he said, "When I tell you to toss, toss." And I was like, okay. So now, I don't know if you know, anytime I do it now. So I'm a volunteer. So every time a pledge break comes up, they check our schedules and I go when I can. But anytime I'm on, you'll see they're counting down and I'm like, no, let's go over to Mike because I don't want to get in trouble again. But it's great experience for me and for so many reasons. And so I always enjoy doing it. Anyway, there. Long answer to a short question.
All right. Well, Greta, thank you very much for being with us today. We really enjoyed, I know I really enjoyed listening, and it was nice having some laughs and everything. And we look forward to when you can hit the stage again with the Church Basement Ladies. I know my wife and I are going to come up and see it when you get back on stage. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, great job, Mike. Great job getting Greta down.
You're very welcome.
I want to, again, congratulate the Arm Boosters and the Hollands for their anniversary. Happy anniversary to you guys. And with that, we're going to close out with When Kiwanis Calls. Are you still there, Doc? You going to lead us through that? Doc, where are you? I just saw him here. Hang on.
He's there. He's muted. He's muted.
No,
Doc, you're muted.
Unmute you, Doc. Doc, you're muted. Unmute yourself. Oh.
Just while he's unmuting, we recently had a Ella Street Singers reunion, and we rehearsed for the day and then we performed, and at the very end I made a huge guffaw, and the good news is Dr. Wortman thought it was funny. I was at the end, Doc, at our Phantom of the Opera thing when I came in too soon and I said this big long thing at the end, and I made a big mess. But Alan Wortman does not hold it against people when they make mistakes.
Nope, he's a great guy. Great guy. Doc, we're ready for When Kiwanis Calls.
Are you ready now?
We're ready.
Okay, I'll unmute. Here we go. Ready? When Kiwanis calls, when Kiwanis calls,
let everyone stand up.
When
When
Kiwanis calls,
when he wants,
let each one raise a cup. A cup as we gather
around the table, as long as we are able, we'll pledge you our loyalty. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks again, Greta. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Everybody have a great week. We will see you next Monday.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Greta.